This is your AP Government video on presidential elections. In the United States, we do presidential elections much differently than they do in parliamentary systems. The president first has to be nominated by the National Party Convention. This is similar to the caucus method of a primary, in which you start with local area caucus meetings and then you send representatives to the citywide meeting, then to the state meeting, and then you send representatives from each state political party to the National Party Convention. Each of the two major parties, Democrats and Republicans, hold a National Party Convention during presidential election years. It's typically in late summer or early fall, and this is where they officially nominate the person. But because most states don't use the caucus system, most states use a ballot primary, we often know who this candidate is going to be months and months prior to when the National Party Convention happens. Despite the fact that most states use these ballots to determine who wins the presidential primaries for each party, the political party can choose somebody different than what the voters chose on ballots. And to go even further, some states require that the candidates from the national party vote for the candidate that won their particular state caucus, and other states do not require that. So what that means is that, let's say in Arizona, for the Republican Party, the state party chose candidate A, and then the representatives from the state party from Arizona go to the party convention, and then they elect their votes for candidate B. That can also happen. So some states bound their delegates to the required, and some states have unbounded delegates, which means the delegates that the party chooses can vote their conscience and not what the electors or the general voters wanted during the ballot primary. So it is possible for the party to pick another candidate than the one that won the primary earlier in the year. Now, this would be very controversial, and of course, this is all happening within one party, so this can create a lot of tension within the party. If there's multiple candidates that are viable candidates, but let's say the moderate wing of the party and the more extreme wing of the party disagree, this can create a lot of infighting, and whoever wins both of the National Party conventions they're going to go on to the general election, and that's when you see somebody from the Republican and Democratic parties battling against each other. So a lot of times the parties do not want a lot of political infighting within their party because they want to save that for when they're battling the other party. Typically, we know who these candidates are going to be because of the ballot primaries, and typically the parties do not change this, even though they do have the potential to do so. A lot of times this convention, therefore, is just for hype. A lot of popular members of the party give speeches, there's balloons. A lot of the most fervent members of the political party from each state attend, and it's a great way to advertise to Americans, because these are typically on television, so people can watch to see what people have to say, and that of course can drive a lot of voter turnout for certain candidates. Now, there's good and bad points to the way that we elect presidents. This is obviously a very partisan way to do a political primary. Because only the members of one party are generally at the convention and are generally choosing the candidates during a primary election, we get low voter turnout, and it's typically the most fervent, most extreme members of the party who turn out and vote. Therefore, we tend to get candidates who are super liberal and super conservative, even though most voters are somewhere in the middle. That's why we end up getting two candidates that a lot of people don't like either of them. The process is also very lengthy. Because a lot of states are front-loading their presidential primaries, the primary is taking 6 months, and then there's another 6 or 8 months before the general election, and then another 2 months before the new president starts. And a lot of people would like to see that not occupy all of the news for over a year. Today, there's a lot of emphasis on media coverage, image, photos, social media, and what's going out. So it's a lot of flash and not a lot of substance. As we talked about earlier, a lot of times the media is covering who's winning or losing. and maybe they said something in a speech that caused them to lose 2 percentage points. But we're talking about that, the horse race, as opposed to actual policies or bills they want to pass or how they would pay for those bills or long-term problems like the national debt. So people who vote in primaries tend to be more educated, they tend to be wealthier, but they also tend to be very ideologically extreme compared to average voters. They tend to be more activist. And the delegates who attend the National Party conventions tend to be unrepresentative of the party as a whole. So there's a certain type of average Republican voter or average Democratic voter, but the people who get to vote for the candidate actually at the National Party convention are handpicked by the state parties themselves. So they tend to be people who volunteer or are paid by the parties, people who have run for office in the past, or people who hold a lot of fundraisers and donate tons of money. And therefore, they tend to also be activists, very ideological, and a lot less moderate, which is why we tend to get candidates that we don't like. All right, let's do active learning number 5. So go ahead and get out your active learning sheet. I want you to come up with a list of pro arguments. What are the best things about the way that we elect our president comparatively to maybe a different way of choosing the president? So explain 2 reasons why conventions and caucuses can be better than ballot primaries. And question B, should television networks be required by the government to give free airtime to each political party so that they can air parts of the convention speeches?